let me get my, and I would like to call to order the Board of Selectmen special meeting for July 14th, 2021. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. All right, and let's see, moving on to, I actually don't have a printed agenda in front of me today, so I guess we open up for citizens' comments. Lauren. Do we have any citizens' comments?
Bill Stableford has his hand raised.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Hi, Bill.
Welcome, everybody. And I want to thank Peggy and all of you for bringing these capital projects out of COVID hibernation, where they have lounged for a long time. I noticed that the issue of the Academy building is towards the end of the agenda. And unfortunately, I have a very firm commitment at 6 p.m., which I cannot escape. So I'm going to make my comments early. As I'm sure you all recall, I was appointed the chair of the Academy Community Center Development Committee. And that committee was created in February of 2019. We were issued 4 charges, and we made an initial report to the Board of Selectmen on April 8th of 2019. In that report, we affirmed the feasibility of a community center and academy, and we presented estimates for construction costs and an architectural plan. At that time, the Colliers International estimated that the renovation costs would total about $14 million. We then held several public information sessions and issued a second report to the Board of Selectmen on July 30, 2019, where we had researched and presented information on potential grants and tax credits to offset the construction costs. We also provided estimates of the operating costs for the building and potential revenue streams. In January 2020, the late Dick Pissarro and I completed a third report on the potential economic benefits of a community center to downtown Madison. This report received very limited exposure because the pandemic shutdown soon followed. And sadly, in March of 2020, Dick Pissarro caught the coronavirus and died from it. As things unfold for the Academy project, I will certainly be publicizing this report to the public, and particularly the Chamber of Commerce and downtown businesses. So where we stand now, in addition to a broad-based community center and arts programming, the Academy building has a very favorable potential to relocate beach and rec offices into that building. I've consulted with Austin Hall. He's very interested in doing so. And since he's also the manager of the senior center and senior services, there could be a seamless coordination between overflow senior services from the senior center into the Academy building. We also know that Youth and Family Services under Scott Cochran is desperately looking for additional space, and that the Youth and Family Services could certainly be accommodated in the Academy building. There may be other town organizations that can be potential stakeholders in creating a true community center. In the near future, I'd like to meet with each of you to discuss potential uses for the building as a community center and to hear your candid thoughts. Finally, I will close with a recommendation, which I think is very clear and very strong, and that is, I believe it would be of great benefit to the town to hire or contract with a grants specialist. We need a guide in applying for these grants and tax credits. Grant applications are very complicated and they require a specialized knowledge. And if you think about it, between the school's capital plan the surf club project, the fire department, the academy building, and the 2 outbuildings at the library. Obviously, these are expensive projects, and while during the depths of COVID, grant money dried up. Now with federal stimulus priming the pumps, the state budget is flush, and there may be millions, if not tens of millions of dollars available in both public government money and as well as private philanthropy and private foundations. So I believe that if the town were to hire or contract with the grants specialist, that position would pay for itself many times over. Thank you. I appreciate your attention, and I wish you well in finishing your agenda.
All right, thank you very much, Bill, for your comments. Any other public comment, Lauren?
There is none.
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much. And obviously we'll be talking more about Academy later in the presentation. So moving on to, and I noticed Scott Murphy has now joined us. Moving on to item number 3 on the agenda, discuss and take action to approve a special appropriation recommended by the Board of Finance for $1 million from the fund balance to the pension as an additional contribution pending town meeting approval. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. All right. And just a little background on this is at the last Board of Finance meeting, as we talked about different ways to use the excess funds we have in the fund balance, and we were talking about the highway funds, they also talked about the pension, and there was a lot of support from that at that Board of Finance meeting. And so they moved forward and took action to support doing that. And I think there was some materials that Stacy sent out to the board. Maybe Stacy, if you just kind of want to walk about why they're doing this now and what the impact is for the town, that would be great.
Sure. Did everybody get the paperwork from Milliman, our actuaries? I emailed it out a little while ago. Okay, so this kind of is just a show and tell of what our annual budgeted, annual determined contribution budgeted amount would be with and without the additional $1 million being infused. So the thought was, not only will this $1 million help with the annual determined contribution that we have to budget for, it will also get us a little bit of a better funded ratio in the pension, and it will also pay off. If you look at the right column and you add all those savings year after year, that comes to about $2 million in budgeted savings for $1 million that we infuse now. So we'll earn, interest on this money, and it will definitely pay off over the next 20 years for the amortization of the pension.
I don't know if there's any questions more. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it's a great use of these types of funds. It's always better to prepare and plan for the future and be ahead of the game a little bit in things when you can have those opportunities. And it also benefits the budget every year, which is always a good thing. So, a reminder that our pension fund is closed to new employees. So this is just for those existing employees that are able to participate in the pension. Any other questions from the board on this or discussion?
This is a fabulous use of excess funds and a wonderful gift to the taxpayers of the future.
Right. Okay. All right. Then I guess all in favor of approving a special appropriation recommended by the Board of Finance for $1 million, say aye.
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 Okay, great. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 4, discuss potential timelines for the Madison School Renewal Plan referendum. And so I thought it would be helpful to have our Board of Ed Chair, Galen Cawley, and our school superintendent, Dr. Cook, give an update on the school renewal plan they presented to us about a month ago. And since then, their board has taken further action to kind of outline what they would envision as an ideal timeline for them to work towards in terms of taking the plan to the public for a vote. So I don't know if we want to invite them up and just say a few words and provide an update. And then we can talk a little bit more about what that timeline would look like and what hurdles would need to be made by, our board and all the various municipal requirements that would need to be made in order to get this to referendum. Okay.
Do you want me to jump in, Ms. Lyons?
Yep.
All right,
Go ahead.
thank
All
you.
yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with the Board of Selectmen tonight. And I see Galen is with me as well. Galen, do you want me to go first, or you want?
Yes, please, go right ahead.
All right. So the board has certainly kept this on the forefront of its work over the last few months, and continuing to have discussions over the summer. At our last meeting, we did discuss the potential time frame, and the board had majority of the board had supported a vote in February, but did also say that if the First Selectman and the Board of Finance favored a time frame in December, we would certainly work within those parameters, but did support the time frame of February, because that would give us the most amount of time as we come back from a COVID shutdown and the inability to have more discussion with the public. We favored the opportunity to have some time frame, as we start the new school year, to have forums and continue to seek public input, and then gearing up for a February vote. Galen, did I capture the board's thoughts on that?
That's,
Okay.
yes, it was a 7-1 vote, and for February, we can work for both, but we think February is the best shot.
I know that just some of the conversations have been about, because we're trying to work through 2 other possible referendum items, it's like moving 3 balls down the field at the same time. And so I appreciate the flexibility that, your board is conscious of. And as we're going to be talking tonight, each referendum opportunity has a lot of complexity to them, and different things could send them off in different directions as we move down. I did ask the bond council to put together just a rough idea so we understand milestones. So I don't know if is it worth if I just show that now on the screen and we can talk a little bit about that. And this is just a draft, high level draft that hopefully this is the right one. Let's see, hold on a second. Okay. There we go. Okay. All right. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So, and basically what we did is talk about the 2 dates and ask them to put together the 2 dates. And just so the public understands, one of the reasonings behind the earlier date is just to get these major decisions done prior to completing the budget process and the capital expenditure process of CIP decision making. And that's why I think there's been a lot of just, in terms of my preference is to have as many of these questions answers as possible before we go and complete the budget. That's still all doable with a February date, but I think we just thought, let's throw out there an aspirational date, and then we have the date that is practically gives a lot of time to the school district to kind of achieve all the milestones that it wants to. So if we working on the date of February 15th, which was I think the recommended date that came from your board, that would require our board to take action by basically right before Thanksgiving. So in November, where we would then have to do any type of, we would take a vote, I guess, and send this on to different approval processes, with the Board of Finance then weighing in before the holidays, which is a good thing. So the timing works okay with all that. And then the Board of Selectmen would then have to go and send this to town meeting. And that would be handled in January, which that final action item then kicks in what we know is that silent period. which is kind of a critical time period for the school district in terms of what kind of information that they can share to the public about or speak and use school facilities and school resources in terms of speaking about the actual proposal. And then it would lead to a referendum date of February 15th. And so that kind of puts together, the kind of the runway that we have, in terms of getting the school proposal ready and going through appropriate approvals. To do it in December, which is a more aggressive timeline, that obviously pulls things forward quite a bit and would require our board to be ready to move things forward in September. Have to go through planning and zoning in October, Board of Finance in October, and then a final action taken in a quite compressed time frame by the Board of Selectmen, with the silent period starting in the end of October, around October 25th. So that gives you a shorter period from when school starts to have your, come in and see the facilities kind of tours and discussion about what the renewal plan is all about. So that silent period would kick in on October 25th. And so now you're getting into a special town meeting would be held the week after Thanksgiving. And then you would hold the referendum on the 14th of December. I know December 7th had been talked about. There was some issue because of the Thanksgiving week that might be problematic. So this is illustrative. Like I said, this is just kind of a high level view of key dates. Obviously this is a more aggressive timeline. It's by all means doable. We also have to keep in mind that we have other things that we might want to include on the same ballot. And so all those things would have to achieve the same milestones that would be laid out in this timeline. So knowing that this is your preferred timeline, I'm assuming, you feel this is adequate in terms of getting your materials and being able to do all your public information sessions and all that stuff, prior to entering that silent period.
We do. We think this would give us the best chance to really share the project with the public who, we've had very limited opportunity to so far. And in fact, looking at that new information today with the silent period and where that would start, I think that's even earlier than what we had anticipated in the board. So I imagine that, speaking again, just from my perspective, I think that recommendation would have been even stronger for the February timeframe.
Yeah, and this is based on meeting schedules. There's always a little wiggle room in here that you can move things to certain dates and stuff like that.
Right.
So, but this was kind of taking like I said, a very simplistic looking at the calendar. But it gives you a general idea, it's going to be within a week or two of that date at least, right? So
yeah, and Galen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I also think that the board felt December 7th was probably as late in December as they would have liked to go on. I think the 14th would also have caused some concern on the board's part.
Okay. So I think that, but I think in terms of, and maybe if I could stop sharing this, we could open up to a little bit of a discussion for our board, is just understanding your thinking at this point. Clearly keeping all those objectives in mind as we work through each of these projects and likely trying to pick a final path. We'd have to pick it by December or by September, right? Because if we're going to try to be more aggressive, you got to make that decision in September according to the timeline. So it gives us a little time over the next month to kind of work through, some of the outstanding issues and questions that we might have.
Agreed.
Any questions from the board for the Board of Ed folks?
Peggy, are you looking for the selectmen to indicate an informal preference right now, or?
I don't think necessarily. I think we need to go through the conversation about all the other things that are going to be on that same ballot, and so we have a better understanding. I think as we've worked through all these details, and you realize the complexities of each of these projects, I guess time does help. I've always been, once again, an advocate for pushing to be as quick and aggressive as possible so that we move things forward. But I think what we now have is at least a more narrower line in sight, of what we should be trying to achieve here. So, and we obviously know what the school's preference is, and that's a major factor, obviously, that we need to consider. So, I think that, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And as I said, I think, the stars are probably going to be aligning in that February direction as we go through. And so maybe the board can have a broader discussion about timelines when we've gone through all the different projects at the end of the discussion. Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, great. All right. All right. Well, thank you very much. And we'll continue onwards. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, great. So, so the next item on the agenda is to review the request for the RFP proposals that we received on Island Avenue School. And just to remind the public, the town issued an RFP for the future use of Island Avenue School in May. Proposals were due back in the end of June, and we had also appointed Colliers as our advisor in this. And I also want to just do a real quick introduction to our new town attorney who has joined us tonight also for this discussion, Carrie Olson at Merthyr Kalina. So she is also on the line. And then we have Felicia and Mark Skalenka here from Colliers to join us. So I thought, welcome Carrie, by the way, for your first meeting.
Hi there. I have to admit I was in a bit of a panic because I couldn't get in before, but Lauren was very sweet to tell me I was on mute until further notice.
So I thought what would be most helpful first is Colliers has prepared a presentation, I think, to go through the process and the proposals that we received. And for the public, those proposals are also available. If you click on the agenda item, there's a link to all the different proposals. So I will turn it over to Colliers.
Thanks, Peggy. This is Mark Skalenka. Nice to see you all again. I'm just going to be brief because I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Felicia Smith, who's a Madison resident and also a project manager with Colliers who led this effort for us. So yes, as Peggy indicated, a couple of months ago, we were re-engaged with the town to look at soliciting proposals from developers for the Island Ave property. Very similar to what we did for the Academy School property, if you remember that from a couple of years ago. So we literally took what was done there and went out and solicited the proposals via a very similar tactic. And again, without getting into too much of the details, I think what Felicia has scripted out in the presentation, the process we went through and ultimately what was submitted for review. Felicia? Can we share a screen, Lauren or Peggy?
Yep.
So we can
go right ahead. You should be able to do it.
Share right now. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I will keep this as brief as possible, just to hit on the highlights. And again, all the proposals that were received are available for further review. So first I'll go through the property and RFP highlights just to highlight some of the main concerns and then the process that was gone through, and then we'll dive into the three proposals that were received. So first, just a recap of the property. Obviously, it's the existing Island Avenue School building and the related infrastructure for it. It is currently on 9.3 acres. There are wetlands there, so it is presumed that about 6 to 7 of those acres are developable, with the wetlands being undeveloped area, and it is in downtown Madison. Current zoning is R2. There was an appraisal done by the town. You can see the price that was the result of that appraisal, and then the property would be sold as is to the developers. And with the property comes some deed restrictions from the original 1947 granting of the property to the town. Within that is the clause that should the property ever come up for sale again, the heirs do have the first right of refusal to any purchase agreement. And the town has received a letter indicating that the heirs do intend to exercise that right should it come up. Additionally, in this deed restrictions, the property is to be used for academic or residential or any other approved zoning, and there would be no commercial or industrial use permitted on the site. And again, it is currently zoned for R2. So what we did leading up to today is the Island Avenue School, as you will remember, was closed in the Madison public school system in 2019 and subsequently rented out to another educational institution. The Island Avenue Ad Hoc Committee was formed in early 2020 to study and recommend the next steps. They proceeded to study and came back with the results in early 2021, which recommended that the project proceeds to RFP with two primary purposes. And that would be for residential development or continued education, seeking proposals from developers for either of those two uses of the site. This is when Colliers was involved, and we assisted the town with developing and publicizing the RFP on May 5th, 2021. Following that, we did have a public site walk to any interested developers to view the property both inside and outside. There was a period of questions and answers and additional information given out. And then the proposals were due by June 30th, 2021, and 3 proposals were received by that deadline. So that brings us to today and the next steps. The proposals have been published to the public for review. I think the preliminary schedule is to have an August 3rd public presentation of the proposals for vetting and further questions and answers, followed by a due diligence period, a vote by the Board of Selectmen to recommend a preferred proposal. And then following that, a vote again to approve the contract, subject to the town meeting and referendum approval, and then a potential referendum, as you could see, either December or March, depending on that. So those would be the next steps. And I will, from here, move into the proposals that were received. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I forgot my slide. The highlights of what was in the RFP that the developers responded to was, again, the 2 recommendations from the IACC for either continued educational use or residential use. The town was open to either considering long-term lease proposals or purchase options. And the transaction priorities were that any proposal was consistent with resident input on the use, would also consider the economic benefits to the town and the local businesses and the quality of life that the development proposal brought to the town. So this is strictly not to be considered on a financial consideration only, but also what benefits it does have to the town citizens. Now we will go into the proposals that were received, and these are in alphabetical order. So the first proposal was from Beacon Communities. You can see the purchase price for the lot as is. They are recommending 70 units. This would include demolishing all of the existing school and putting up several townhomes and then these 1 3-story larger structure. And that is how they would fit 70 units onto this property. Obviously, density of this side would include a zoning variance or affordable housing district designation needed by the town. They are also requesting tax relief from the town on their proposal moving forward. And their model proposes a joint community of 80% senior housing and about 20% set aside for those families looking to enter the foster care system. They do have a community set up as this in Massachusetts already, and the idea is that the seniors would support the foster care families as they're coming into the community and act as additional sort of community helpers. So again, they would demolish the existing building, but the playscape and the grounds that would be built would be open to the larger community as part of the amenities that they would offer back to the town. And this is their site plan that you can see. And just for a reference, they do have reference letters from Bank of America, US Bank, and RBC Capital Markets included in their proposal as requested. And these are the recent projects that they have completed. And again, there's much more information contained with the actual body of the proposal, but the high level snapshot of that. Moving on to proposal number 2 that was received from Newport Realty Group. You could see the purchase price up there of $300,000. They are proposing 22 units to be contained within the existing school building, which they would modify. And then there would be additional 5 townhouse duplex units built on site as well. Again, for property and for this density, they would need a zoning variance. This is beyond what the R2 currently allows. Taxable income would be determined based on the new valuation of the property after the building was completed. They are proposing to do a 55+ community with a housing association with that as well. So as I mentioned, they would reuse part of the school and renovate that. And then the grounds of the developed property would continue to be open to the larger community. And there's potential to share the community spaces within the existing school, the gym, cafeteria area, if the town was open to that sort of share agreement for either events or meetings or whatever, what have you. And then proposal number 2, again, they included letters of reference from Ion Bank and Thomaston Savings Bank. And this is also included in their proposal. They have a snapshot of their most recent projects, the completion date, where they were located, the size, just so you can get a sense of other projects of this nature that they have completed. And then proposal number 3 was from OLM Prep. The purchase price of $2,300,000 is based on a separate property appraisal that they had done for this, and that is the price that the property appraisal did give for the property. They would be purchasing it from a private for-profit purchase entity. It would require no change to zoning or use, as they would continue to use it as an educational facility in its current state. The taxable income is to be determined. However, the current taxable income is available on the property under the Madison tax revenue, if you wanted to look at that. So again, they would continue the use of the existing building. The grounds and the playscape would remain open to the larger public as they are now during off hours. They did not include any letters of reference or any further information on how they would structure the purchase of the property. But they did, jumped ahead. They did include the summary of what they believe are the benefits to the community if OLM Prep were to purchase the building outright. And again, this is taken directly from the proposal that is available for further review.
Can I ask a quick question, Felicia?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously noticeably different purchase prices. Did the first 2 option, proposal 1 and proposal 2, did they also base anything on an appraisal? Clearly proposal number 3 has an appraisal as a background. I'm just interested kind of how they came up with the purchase prices, given they're significantly lower.
Absolutely. So in the formulation of this RFP, we did have a discussion about whether or not to include the 2021 proposal that was provided, that was done on behalf of the town. And the group opted not to share that information because we did want to understand from the developers what they thought a purchase price would be in order to support being able to develop these properties and still see a profit for their end communities. So that is why you do not see the appraisal included in that. Again, without knowing sort of their calculations as to what their profit margins are, I can't speak directly to the purchase price, but I will say, let me double.
Hey, Felicia, hey, can I add something? Scott, this is Mark Skalenka from Colliers. I think the factor that was obviously not being considered for OLM versus the other two is the redevelopment cost. So OLM will buy it for $2.3 million and may not put any money into the building. The other two are buying it for, $250,000 or $300,000 and are going to probably put $3 or $4 or $5 million into the property. So we're running their pro formas. And then, when they go to sell or rent the properties, it's all part of a calculation, but I can guarantee you that's why the sale price is significantly lower than OLM.
Right. And
Very helpful. Thanks.
I would have to double check the exact numbers. I have them flagged, but I believe Newport Realty is looking at a development price around $4 million for their development prices, and Beacon Properties is looking at something closer to 30 million to develop out what they were proposing for the site.
4 million versus 30. Is that what you said?
I believe so, and I will double check those numbers. I did have them flagged. I can't pull them up right.
Yeah, but the project, the Beacon project is significantly larger. I mean, you're talking 70 units versus, was it 14 units for?
22, I believe.
Or was it 22 for the?
Right. So this is
summarized there. Yeah.
Yep. 22 units.
Yeah. And then the other thing is keep in mind that the demolition and remediation costs, I think it was like we had estimated about $1.7 million, I think, to clear the site and demolish the building. There's obviously some material issues with because the age of the building and stuff. So that's going to be a factor in anybody looking to demolish the building as part of their plan.
Yeah, it was $30,089,000 was the development cost, 19.6 million for construction alone at 350,000 per unit. So anyway, that's why the sales price is lower.
If we could go back to we don't have to go back to the slide, but go back to the topic of the right of first refusal from the heirs. I don't know if this is a question for Carrie or if somebody at Colliers wants to field it, but is the right of first refusal for the project in its entirety or the simple purchase price of the property?
I think it's just for the simple purchase price of the property, Bruce. Okay. I think if somebody offers $1 million and you want to sell it to $1 million, the heirs can say, you know what, no, we'll purchase it for $1 million.
It's price as well as terms. And Carrie can weigh in here, but we did talk extensively that the matching piece would be simply the consideration paid plus the terms of the purchase and sale agreement.
Yeah, precisely the way it's written, and it's not perfectly written, but the way the right of first refusal is written, once you have a bona fide offer to purchase the property, all they have to do is match that price. So for example, if you have a purchase price for the property of $300,000, and that's the one you select, you have to present that to them. They have 30 days to accept or reject. If they accept it and decide to go forward with the right of first refusal, then they have 30 days to pony up the money and close. Now, so two complicating things, not to digress too much, but two complicating things. One is you have all elected, or at least my understanding is you will be electing to send whatever decision is made to a referendum. So we're going to have to give them additional time, because if they choose to exert their right of first refusal, then whether to sell the property to them is going to be the question on the ballot, right? It's not going to be whether to sell it to OLM. I also want to say, though, that in reviewing the letter that was provided by the heir's attorney, it appeared to me that their major concern was maintaining this property as a school. So it could very well be that if OLM agrees to purchase it and maintain it as a school, that they will be willing to give us a release. As long as there, I guess, are some conditions to maybe perhaps the town having a right of first refusal to grab it back if OLM ever went out of business. But some of that is conjecture.
Mhm.
Okay, are we in a position, are we allowed to put our own deed restrictions on this property in the process of divesting it?
Yeah, so whatever agreement we reach with whoever is the successful proposer is what is presented to the heirs. And,
Well, I think what I just heard is if we were to choose Beacon, the heirs would only have to come up with the 250. They wouldn't be obligated to any of the other development requirements.
exactly. They'd have a right to purchase the property for the bona fide sale price, because the town is only getting the 250 or 300,000.
Mhm.
So that's the bona fide purchase price for the fee. So they only have to match the bona fide purchase price.
Gary, if we were to if we were to come up with a solution that was agreeable to the heirs, would it be reasonable to think that they could then just relinquish their right of first refusal? Contingent upon that?
That's
Yeah, that's
extremely,
what she was saying. She was saying that we could actually go to them if we had made a choice with the school as the, preferred bidder.
I mean, we could go to them with any of the proposals, but based on the letter that I reviewed, and if in fact their major concern is that this property be maintained as a school, you're going to have, I think, much greater success in going to them and seeking a release for the OLM proposal, which is proposed to keep it as a school. Not to mention the purchase price, which is significantly higher, and which they are probably going to be less likely to want to match.
Right, right. Is there a reason, this doesn't necessarily require a referendum, does it?
No, it does not. But my understanding is that your residents have been promised a referendum on, I think, each of the issues that we've been dealing with today. Obviously, referendums required for the school project. But my understanding from speaking with First Selectwoman Lyons is that throughout the course of history, this has kind of been what's been promised, is that the town would have a vote. Is it required? No. That's obviously a very
the other choice is town meeting, but I think that this is unprecedented for the town, to be honest, to sell an asset of this level. We've never done it before, and it's obviously a premier publicly owned property. And I think all along people have expected the opportunity to weigh in on those choices. So, and as we know, our town meeting history is, not really an indication necessarily of the will of the people, given our low participation rates in our town meetings.
I think this one would get people out.
Yeah.
It would. I just hope to God we don't have to do it virtually. We had one virtual town hall meeting, and that was quite an experience. And that was just on the renewal of the lease for all. Yes. So, and we had 100 people, I think close to 100 people attend that. But but I think the referendum component of this, it gets complicated, with the timeline, because we have to then get it, go to the heirs. But if we're able to, and once again, this is presupposing that the board choose to go forward with the school, then, we have the opportunity perhaps to get some sort of release so that we don't have to worry about that time horizon. And it makes it cleaner and simpler, right, for the actual referendum. Because we'll be able to do it directly with the specific proposal from the school.
And again, I obviously don't take a position on any one of the matters, But what I was hearing tonight was also that there are, you know, tax abatement agreements being requested from at least one of the developers. And so I know tax revenue has always been a big issue. And one of the understandings that I've been told was made with OLM is that, you know, they anticipate that they will be a for-profit entity paying reasonable taxes to the town. We would want to build that into any kind of an agreement if that's the route you wanted to take. But I appreciate where you all are sitting right now, because it's almost like comparing apples and oranges, right? So it's a tough one. But so you have to weigh all of the pros and cons, obviously. I do feel with respect to the right of first refusal, moving towards a educational school type use is going to be, at least based on that letter, way more palatable for the heirs. And more likely to garner a voluntary release.
So I guess this, in terms of with, you know, for Collier's sake, if there are there any specific questions on the developer proposals or OLM's proposal that the board has?
I have a question. Do we have any idea, have they given any information about what the cost of, by they, I mean, Beacon and Newport, what the cost of these units would be to the public?
The final sale price that they're looking for?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I believe Beacon is looking for about 350,000 for their units, depending on if they're a 3 to 5 bedroom. And Newport has estimated about $500,000 for each of their units.
And then the rental was about what, 2,000 for the existing building component?
Right, 2,000 for the units within the existing school. So the existing school would become rental units that they're looking for 2,000
a month.
Those units, and then the 10 multi-unit townhouses would go for about $500,000 each, is what they're predicting now based on market value.
That's for Newport. So Newport would be offering rentals?
Rentals and purchases.
Yeah, and
Yep.
Okay.
A mixed.
And did they indicate because my understanding is that when the Island Avenue Committee reviewed the septic capability of the property, that, you know, that it could not support this level of development for Beacon. So I'm just wondering, did they talk about how they would be? I don't remember. I kind of went through the proposals, but I don't know if you had any follow-up conversations about that. Because obviously they'd have to make maybe that's part of why their development costs are so high. They'd have to make a big investment in some sort of septic system to accommodate such a large project.
I would anticipate they would. They did not say anything specifically in their proposal, but the septic report and all of those findings were provided as part of the RFP documents. So I would have hoped that they would have looked into that and looked at that as well. But they did not address that directly in their proposal.
Okay. Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah, final one. Is there any reason why we should be concerned that one of these proposals is not a valid or credible proposal?
I don't think so, Bruce. They've got great experience, references, interests. Obviously, there'd be a due diligence period, you know, so we can vet that out. But I couldn't imagine Beacon or Newport wouldn't be valid based upon the asking price. You can question whether or not OLM come up with $2.3 million, but let's assume that they can or will.
I'd like to ask Mark or Felicia whether we got any feedback from developers who chose not to submit a proposal.
Yeah, that's a good question, Al. I was thinking about that because if you remember, for Academy, we had about 12 that submitted qualifications and we shortlisted to 9 for proposals. My only guess, Al, is you know, the deed restrictions probably scared off, because we had, I think, 5 or 6 developers at the walkthroughs. And it's entirely possible because, you know, it's not inexpensive to put together a proposal, to put together a you know, an opportunity for development. You know, they've got to pay the architects, you know, to come up with concepts and schemes, and a lot of them might have felt, you know, this is going to go nowhere. So let's not even, you know, we've got other opportunities that have less restrictions, less hurdles. That would be my guess, Al. But that's a great question, because I was thinking that same thing. It's a great parcel. It's in a great area. It's a great town. But, you know, the fact that deed restrictions out there probably scared off quite a few people.
Right. Mark and Felicia, the Beacon proposal, they're talking about affordable housing district, but they're talking about what sounds like market rate units. Can you just calibrate us to what affordable means in Madison?
Well, affordable in I'll take a step first, could mean, I don't want to say workforce, because it's you know, senior housing or family supporting. So, you know, maybe it's for the family supporting foster children, Bruce, that it's more workforce related housing, you know, firemen, policemen, teachers, you know, citizens of that nature. You know, you know, market rate in Madison in that area is not, well, you heard, you know, $500,000 is probably the going rate for a townhouse in that area. Is that affordable? For some, I suppose it is. But I think it's probably for, you know, the family supporting the foster children, where they would probably go to a workforce housing rate versus a market rate.
Right. Within the proposal, there is a section on zoning modifications where they discuss their strategy. They do say, and I'm quoting here, another possible strategy could be to designate this site as an affordable housing district in accordance with Section 26 of Madison zoning regulations. This floating zone designation was established for the purpose of promoting the inclusion of below market rate housing within private sector residential developments. So that is, they're quoting a Madison zoning regulation as a proposed strategy, again, to get zoning clearance on this.
So I'm not as involved in the whole RFP process as all of you are, but I will say that in general, because of the state mandates to provide for affordable housing, what I have recommended and what many towns have done, and I would include Madison in there, even though I wasn't the one who recommended it, is you try to give developers an alternative to what we call 830G. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but 830G is a statutory affordable housing appeal process that allows you to skirt all zoning, as long as you provide housing that provides, to some degree, people who earn at 80% of the median income and some who earn at 60% of the median income. And that's where the term workforce housing comes from, because it's not Section 8 housing, but it's people who serve the community but can't afford the high housing costs, like firemen and teachers and that kind of thing. That's where the workforce housing terminology came from. So what I have recommended to a number of towns, and apparently Madison has done this on its own, is give developers an alternative to 830G, which has a very strict, you know, certain percentage, 40-year deed restrictions, the whole 9 yards. Give them something that's a little more palatable, but still gives you control over zoning. And so you would sort of want to look at that carefully to see if this is something that you think would fly. You know, it's a scenario where that could help you meet your affordable housing obligations under state law. But at the same token, you have the deed restrictions, which, as we pointed out, kind of lean towards an educational use to avoid a lot of delay and potentially litigation.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go down the development route, then you're going to have to weave through all of this, right? Because you've got two different proposals, two different zoning requests that would be made, a very different, you know, profile of what would be put into on the property. And I don't know how it works for 55 plus. Are those deed restricted 55 plus, or are they just more like, you know, condo kind of type guidelines. You know, I don't know how that works with 55 plus. Is that the same? Is that a deed restriction that comes?
It was not clearly spelled out, and that was just their proposal. They're willing to work with the town on,
Okay.
you know, different, if you weren't interested in senior housing, they would be willing to amend their proposal to
Okay.
accommodate
Okay,
whatever residential group.
right, okay.
And would Beacon be would they be willing to negotiate on the number of units?
Potentially, we have not approached them on their proposal or any changes to it at this point.
To reduce, Aaron, would you say the number of units or add?
Potentially, but I mean, that would be tough maybe for them from a financial perspective.
Yeah, they'd have to run their pro forma to see, you know, if they had less units, less sales. And then of
Right.
course it'd be less taxable benefits at the town, but yeah, I mean,
Right.
we could probably talk to them about any of the options. Here.
And when they propose a number like that they've done, is that, do they do any kind of a market analysis to see if there would be a demand to even for that number that they've proposed, or is that something that's done?
I'm sure, Aaron, they've done market
Subsequent.
analysis and
Yeah.
they've determined that, you know, based upon what's happening in the residential real estate market, 70
In Madison,
units
yeah.
in Madison, Connecticut would be very attractive.
The other, not to throw a wrench into everything, and maybe Al and Felicia are aware of this, but there's relatively new legislation that was just passed that deals with whether you can actually put a cap on the number of dwelling units, and also bolsters the argument for affordable housing, meaning workforce housing. Those statutes take effect on October 1st. And there are some opt-out provisions for some of them. But you should just, you know, be aware that that's coming down the pike as you're making your decisions about which proposer to choose at this juncture.
Gary, does that include the increased effluence on the septic systems, the increased flow rates?
Does the statutory terms? So what it's done is it's amended section 8.2 of the zoning regulations to basically require that you consider various things when creating your zoning regulations, as well as having specific provisions that if you don't opt out as a legislative body, will automatically kick in at a certain point. And I would have to go back. I know Bircha Moses is, I believe, representing you guys in the land use context.
Mhm.
So you may want to get, you know, a little more input from them, but you just have to be aware that there are deadlines to opting in or, you know, or out or amending your regulations to comply with the new statutory provisions. It's Public Act 2129. And it provides, in addition to, you know, sort of pushing towards affordable housing, new criteria for you to consider in your development plans and your approvals, including parking. You know, it now says, and again, there are opt-out provisions for some of this, not for others, but saying that you can't require more than one parking space per dwelling unit unless you opt out. I mean, this is all, you know, all of our land use heads are still spinning on a lot of this. You know,
So does this come though, is this driven as a recommendation from planning and zoning, or is it driven by the town, the Board of Selectmen?
So what happens is that the Planning and Zoning Commission of the town, or Planning Commission of the town, to my mind, again, at the end of the day, it's a vote of the legislative body. If you want to opt out of these things, instead of having planning and zoning decide, they may say, okay, we think we should opt out. But at the end of the day, your opt-out is not valid until the legislative body agrees that you should opt out.
Yeah.
So, so again, it's complex. The Public Act is long. And there's just a lot that we're dealing with based on the previous special session. You know, you add the cannabis legislation, which itself is 300 pages long, I mean, it's a mess.
Yep.
So we're still trying to weed
Yep.
our way through this and to advise everybody as best we can. There are some unanswered questions, but you need to be aware that on October 1, 2021, the game changes. And so you might want to consider that as part of your analysis here of the various proposals that are in front of you.
So just so I understand though, is the October, because I saw I think CCM had sent out, right, an overview of the new regulations, but is that the action has to be taken by October 2021?
No,
Right.
no, you have until the following spring.
That's
Yeah.
what so.
But you
yeah.
still want to be aware, right, for planning.
Oh, no, you're absolutely. And I know it's something because, some of those are an issue for us and some of them aren't. It just depends on the specifics of each of the zoning regulations. And so my thought had been having planning and zoning review where there is conflict, because they're the experts in terms of what our actual regulations are, but then go through and figure out what path we want to go forward. But fair points. And I think it's, mindful to keep, we got to think about this because any of these projects will be impacted by that, obviously, because of the timing. If we were to go down the route with the development proposals.
Exactly. And again, I'm not trying to steer you in one direction or another. I'm
Right.
just trying to give you as much information as you can.
Yep.
As I can, so that you understand what might be coming down the pike. And again, to Al's point, when it comes to affordable housing, just for those of you who don't know, the backstory to that was really Fairfield County. That was the real problem because you had towns like, and I'm not picking on any one town, but Darien and Wilton and Greenwich, were the people who taught their children, put out their fires, and policed their environment, had to commute 2 hours because they couldn't even afford to live in the communities where they worked. That was really and truly the backstory behind affordable housing, i.e. workforce housing. And again, we have been trying for years to dissuade people from the notion that affordable housing equates to subsidized housing like Section 8.
Right.
And unfortunately, because there is still sort of that notion out there that affordable housing means subsidized housing, a lot of our communities have been unsuccessful, and Governor Malloy stepped it up and made it, even tougher and says now you have to have an affordable housing plan. I don't know where you all are on that.
We have it. We're in the process of doing one. So,
okay. and this latest legislation puts a little more teeth into that because it used to be that if we didn't put together affordable housing plans, so what?
Right.
But now
you have to. That's why we've got it going, and we have a committee and all that. We've hired a consultant, and
so again, I'm not trying to dissuade. I'm just trying to give as much information as possible, so that when you're balancing all of these proposals, you have all of this information in the back of your mind.
Well, it's very helpful because obviously by some of the proposals, it's an important factor as we evaluate these. So I think that, from maybe we could stop the screen share there real quickly and talk a little bit about our board's next steps on how we would envision moving forward on this. And I had put on the agenda some action items more as a hypothetical so we can decide, we really have two paths. We can say, hey, there's really no choice here because of the right of first refusal. We have to go with the school. Let's get the process going and go to a public hearing with the school proposal, start the 825, I think it's called, referral to planning and zoning, which a step has to be taken there. We have to have the Board of Finance review. All that before we can start really negotiating the purchase and sale agreement, which will take some time. There's complexities to it because of the different things that the town would like to see as part of that agreement. So those are all timing things. The other choice is to take a pause and let the public weigh in more fully on the three options and call the public hearing tonight. And we're back to, now that we're out of the state of emergency, we're back to the need to publish notice in newspapers. So we have a longer lead time on notice periods. And I think the earliest date we can have this public hearing is, I want to say it's August 2nd. Is that correct? That's the earliest we could set the public hearing up.
Yes.
So we can then choose to be more time, take a little bit more time and allow the public to weigh in a little more on all the proposals, knowing that there's this right of first refusal out there that's looming and some complexities. And then after that public hearing, then take action to move one preferred proposal forward to Planning and Zoning, Board of Finance for those referrals. So it basically would add, 3-ish weeks to the timeline. It's not unreasonable, but I leave that for a discussion for the board. Do we want to, which path we would want to take? And that would dictate, I think, what we would do on the agenda in terms of if we would, just calling the public hearing for all 3 proposals, or specifically picking a proposal, calling the public hearing, as well as directing review for the other 2 boards. So any thoughts on that?
Well, in the past, and Al and Scott, you guys can weigh in, but I think when we did this with Academy, we had all of the RFPs that made it this far come and present at a public hearing, that we didn't pick a favorite before the public had a chance to hear it at least once, and probably want to continue that tradition, that would give the bidders each a chance to present to the public. And then I think for our part, one of the things we should do is start actively soliciting the community for their preference on a town meeting versus a referendum question. I think because that is another complication to the process. So I would advocate that we take action tonight to set a public hearing for all 3.
Okay, any other thoughts on that for the board?
I'd like to support Bruce's thoughts here. I guess I'm a bit old guard here, but it still is a town meeting form of government. I think the big decisions like this deserve as much exposure to the public as possible. And I think before I, as a selectman, pick one of these to go forward, I'd really like to see the public reaction to it. So even though it's going to take at least 3 extra weeks to our process, I would like to see us as a next step, share these with the public, and we, the selectmen, can then hear the public's reaction.
Okay, yeah.
I agree as well. I mean, I think the public deserves to hear all 3 options from the developers / OLM directly. So I completely support that. I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, and Aaron?
I support that as well for all the reasons just stated.
No, I agree as well. I think it is the best path forward. It just, despite some kind of mitigating circumstances that leans heavily in one direction, as we always know, it's important to let everybody have their voice heard, and new information always is forthcoming, I find too. So so I think if that's the case, then I guess for item number 6 on the agenda, I guess the motion would read, and would we want to, are we definitely ready to set a date on this, Lauren? I'm just saying, did you check with the registrars and calendars? And we haven't really talked to our board.
The public hearing doesn't involve the registrar. It's just you.
Oh, that's right. I'm thinking, yeah, we were talking about, sorry, yeah. And I think the date we had settled on was August 2nd,
3rd.
right?
Was it August 2nd or 3rd?
August 3rd.
Yeah.
So before I do a motion, I just want to double check that. So this is a hearing, and I guess we have to decide if we want to do it Zoom or in person, and then does that date accommodate board members if we hold it on August 3rd?
My only other question is, what about the proposers?
Mhm.
Have they been made aware that there may be a public hearing on August 3rd?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, I've told them to hold the time.
perfect.
Okay, so we're good there.
Mute myself.
Okay. So if that is amenable to everybody, and I guess we can do this a hybrid since it's public hearing. So even if a board member is, unable to be here in person, we can set it up as a hybrid meeting for the hearing. And maybe that's a good option because some people I know like to come in person. Okay, so I guess then I would want to make a motion to approve moving all three proposals for the Island Avenue School forward to public hearing scheduled for August 3rd, 2021.
So moved.
I'll second that. Is there a time of day, Peggy, that we need to put into this?
Into the motion.
Yeah.
Usually we have 7 o'clock, right? Or we can do 6:30.
I think 7 p.m. is kind of our tradition. Gives people a chance to get home, even though everybody's working from home these days.
We've done it both, I know. Sometimes we try to have a board meeting afterwards, so.
Yeah, it could be a late day, just so you know. I mean, we usually give each developer about an hour each to present their ideas and thoughts, and then there's obviously public discussion and opinion. So I think for Academy, we started earlier than 7 because, well, I think we had 4 or 5 that were presenting. But yeah, it could be a very late evening if you started at 7. I'm just throwing it out there for.
Mark, is there something sacrosanct about an hour? That sounds like a very long time.
Yeah, I would say 30 minutes for each one would be the suggestion.
What I'm saying, the presentation might, if we're talking about in total for presentation and then commentary, that's not enough time. You want them to speak, in some level of detail about their ideas, their thoughts. They're going to bring more detail. And then, I remember at Academy, there were a lot of people that spoke for each of those developers. And, I don't know if you're going to cut them off after 5 minutes or 3 minutes, but if you have 15 people that want to have an opinion on OLM and they're 3 minutes each, do the math. I
think I actually was the keeper of the time, if I remember correctly, Mark. So I think we had a timer.
You might have. The point is, I think if you left a sum total of an hour between presentation and public discussion, that's probably enough. I think if you were to cut that to a half an hour, you're going to find out very quickly it's not enough time.
So Mark, this is Carrie, are you proposing that each proposer, that their presentation be followed by public comments on their presentation immediately and then move, or that each presents, they each get a half hour to present and then the public questions and comments are directed after?
I think, Carrie, what happened at the Academy is after each presentation, questions were asked by the public, including members of the board. And there was a building committee with that project too, and they asked questions. So there were a lot of questions asked as they were standing there. And then at the end, there might have been open to public comment for just commentary on all 4 or 5 proposers. It was a long night.
So, okay, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that we can discuss format maybe. I'm not anticipating this as being the same level, having been a member of the public at the time that was going on. That was a very different environment, so to speak. But I would argue, I do think maybe starting at either 6 or 6:30 would be the right thing to do. Maybe we do a 6 o'clock. I've seen 6 o'clock here, I've seen 6:30, I've seen 7. So, and that does at least try to get everybody done by 9.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Peggy. A 6 to 9 block is probably.
And we are offering, keep in mind, Bruce, we are offering hybrid, so people can participate remotely too if they don't have the ability to get to the hearing physically,
Yeah. So 6 is fine.
Yeah, okay. So I will amend my motion to say approve the moving all 3 proposals for the Island Avenue School forward to a public hearing scheduled for 6 p.m. on August 3rd, 2021.
May I make just one more suggestion, just in case you weren't already doing it? Maybe publish all of the proposals on your website and have the public notice reference your website link.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we will do that. And they're
Okay.
actually available too right now on the agenda tonight. The public has access to it, but we'll make a special, aware of that. So can I get a second on my motion?
Second.
Okay, okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, great. Okay, so we'll do that and then, get everything prepared for that. I think, also if there are other questions that the board members have that they would like the developers to address, we should try to get those to Colliers and they can submit those to the three groups. So I would argue then, item number 7, I would argue we would want to table until we've held the public hearing, which was the motion for the 824 review for planning and zoning, and we would want to table item number 8 as well, which is Board of Finance.
So just before we put those thoughts to bed, Carrie, how much work is it for planning and zoning to review these per the 824?
So you can have them review all of them, but at the end of the day, what I suggested to Peggy was decide on the proposer you want to go with and then submit that to them. So let me give you an example. You send all 3. Planning and zoning says, we're looking at this and, we want to go with, we think that the best idea is Beacon Communities. You then go to the public hearing and what comes out of the public hearing is going with the school. So now you've got to send it back to PZC to say, are you in favor of us selling this to the school? So what I was trying to suggest was, if you have the public hearing first, and then ultimately it's the Board of Selectmen's decision as to which proposer to go with. And then once you've selected the proposer, you send it out to Board of Finance and you send it out to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Now you've sort of truncated the process. It just sort of puts you in sort of a tailspin to send everything to the 3 of them now, all 3 to both of them now, and then have potentially what comes out of the public hearing is a disconnect. I mean, you could even have the Planning and Zoning Commission decide, on all 3 for one project and the Board of Finance to decide on another. And then where does that leave you, right? So at the end of the day, you're going to have to go back to them again.
Well, and I think that one thought is that our board could and this is what I was thinking about, we could convene quickly after the public hearing. Planning and zoning meets on August 5th. So what we could do is notice a special meeting following the public hearing. And then if we feel confident coming out of that public hearing that we have a lead dog, so to speak, then we could just do a quick referral there. And then it could go right onto their agenda for their August 5th meeting. I don't know if I'm being, and then that way we're not, pushing things out too much.
You can put on your agenda for August 2nd or 3rd, I can't remember which one it is now. You can put the public hearing and then also put on the agenda possible action.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you may all, after hearing the public comments, feel like it, you need to digest everything. But to the extent you don't, you can really,
right
from the public hearing to a decision,
right,
and referral. So,
so that's something I think that we could probably, and that's, we can iron that out, I think, in the next couple of days if we want to tag it on. I guess it would be a special meeting, right, that we would notice to follow the public hearing. Lauren, I know we've done that before in the past, right? Yeah.
So you have to.
I like that. I like this idea of bolting it on to the public hearing. I think it's a great idea.
And then it gives us an option, and we just adjourn the meeting if we feel like we're not ready to do anything in it after the public hearing. So
exactly.
So that's good. I think it tees us up, and we've got a timeline now. So we would table items 7 and 8. And then I think then we can move on real quickly now, because I know a lot of people have a lot of other commitments tonight to talk about Academy. If that's all right, is everybody good moving forward to Academy now?
Mhm.
Okay, so I think just to be, let's see, hopefully this is the, no, that's not the right. I'm going to share my screen again. What is this? I have two screens and it always ends up messing up when I do screen share. So can you see the document here, the presentation? Okay, so I'll move down to Academy. I won't spend a lot of time. I know we all know the history of Academy, but I just want to walk through again once more. School closed in 2004, turned over the town in 2011. And this might be entertaining for Carrie to see this, that this project has been around a while. We've had tons of studies. We've had multiple committees. And where we are now is we have this community center proposal that really came out of a committee that was formed in 2018, the Academy Guidance Committee. And that included some of the things that, Bruce was referring to and Mark Skolenko was referring to, where we had developers make proposals about the use of Academy. Ultimately, what happened, there was a recommendation that a public poll would get conducted. The committee conducted and hired a company to do a statistically valid poll in November 2018. And the conclusion came back that the town was very much in support of continued ownership of the building and then restoring it as a community center. And there was a lot of opposition to the sale and development of the building and the ball fields and parkland surrounding the building. So the Board of Selectmen then charged a new committee to focus just on the community center. And that was the Academy Community Center Design Committee. Bill Stableford chaired that when he spoke earlier in our public comments. They came up with a design proposal, cost estimates, and basically that was in 2019. And then this board here took up Academy, and in February, we adopted a timeline to move forward with the Academy Community Center proposal, as well as the Madison School Renewal Plan. And there had been a philosophy, from the Board of Finance, primarily just, and also I think in general, wanting both of these proposals on the same ballot so people understood, the financial commitments that the town was making. So we launched this with the idea of having a standalone referendum in October. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, COVID hits, right? And so there was a little bit of a pause that was taken, and the board chose to rescind that timeline for further review in the future. So now I know some people have said, well, it's just, we kind of forgot about Academy. Well, we didn't forget about Academy. We used this time, the board had engaged a consultant to complete a townwide facilities audit and condition assessment. Academy School was part of that assessment to look at the building and reassess all the improvements that would need to be made. And their final report, it took them a while to complete that. That came forward to us in February. And they did identify some space needs. Part of the community center plan was to use part of the space for actual town offices and part of it for community center purposes. And so the DRA report actually identified some space needs for town departments. And then there was also an estimate of roughly what improvements would be needed to make the building actually usable and accessible. And the latest estimates were like $17 million. So all that information kind of came forward around February with the DRA study. So now here we are looking at the school proposal is now ready to move forward. So it makes sense to now, bring forward again Academy. And so I think that, there's some clear next steps, I think, to make sure it's positioned and the information is there and it can align up next to the school renewal plan in terms of moving forward for the referendum. We need to update the project costs. The estimates that we got from DRA were more just basic, weren't directed toward a specific use necessarily. So we want to update the project cost estimates based on the design that the committee came up with. We also now know a lot more about what our town office space needs are, and refine the use of the municipal space. So the plan is more well-defined about how much square footage the town would take of the building, what departments would move there, and incorporate that all into the design. There were a lot of questions about the programming of the building and what the community would be using the building for and who would be using it and who would pick programs and run them. So I think we need to refine that a little bit more. And as you heard, Bill has been working with Austin, and Austin, the lead, new director of our Beach and Rec department, is going to be taking a deeper dive into all that to refine the municipal use plan, programming plans for the community center. And then we have to, I think, have a firmer, a firmer plan on what type of personnel this would require, if any new personnel or not, how the building would be managed, and then address some of this utilization needs assessment that we've been wanting the facilities committee to address. So, so those are some of the kind of follow-up items that I think that we could continue to focus on here over the next couple months as we move towards referendum for Academy. So this just kind of lays out the 3 projects, to understand each one of these have a lot of history, and they have been supported by, boards and committees. The school renewal plan went through a tri-board that came up with a recommendation, and then the Board of Education is endorsing it. The Academy one is all those multiple previous committees, and then now it's been endorsed by the Academy Community Center Design Committee. And then Island Avenue, the options that we've in the RFP process was driven by the Island Avenue Future Use Committee. So we've gone through that vetting process, that public vetting process with a lot of public participation. The timing is really each one has their unique time requirements and hurdles to get over. So I just kind of outlined some of those. The Board of Ed obviously wants a February referendum. They have to have this completed by June in order to get their grant applications in for funding. So that's a hard stop for them, that we have to have this referendum happen. And basically all their capital planning projects have been on hold for years because waiting for this referendum. So they're very eager. And that's just where I kept saying, I don't want to go through another budget cycle not knowing about any of these projects. We're just paralyzed right now about making any kind of investment decisions. In terms of Academy, I think, the building's been vacant since 2004. So we know this has just been an albatross around, I think, the town's neck for a long time. And I know that the Academy supporters want to take this to referendum as soon as possible. And I think all our town planning decisions are on hold until we know if we're going to have Academy. We have a lot of needs that the town operationally needs, but we can't decide anything until we know if we're going to have this 40,000 square foot building available for some of our departments. So it's important for us as a town to move forward on our planning process and our master plan to know if that building is going to be included in it. And then under Island Avenue, obviously we have the lease expiration of next summer. The school is eager to know their destiny and their future. Are they going to be able to stay in the building and have that be their permanent home? And so it's important for them to have some decisions made. So, so I think with all of that, each project has next steps. But I do feel that, we can get all these kind of moving forward. Each one has their different things to achieve. And I think that we could probably get all of these to a point where we could get them all on one ballot. And I think it would be the right thing to aspire to that. And obviously each one might have a twist or a curve or a bump in the road that might, create a problem. But I feel like, it's important that we as a board just kind of moving these things forward. We need to make decisions and move on and allow the community to finally weigh in on all these major issues in our town. So that's my swan song on this at this point. And happy to open it up to discussion. I don't think I think this is just more preparing us that, if we are all amenable to moving all of this forward, We, by September, need to pick a date, a referendum date, so that we have to, if we do December, it has to all be decided by the end of September, according to the timeline. If we do February, what ends up on that ballot would be decided in November. So that, any thoughts from the board on
So,
that?
yeah, so a couple of questions.
Yeah.
The goal of putting them all together, is that being driven through the Board of Finance preference for everything to be together, or?
I think it's multiple things. I think one, the Board of Finance has been very vocal about that's what they think the right thing to do is to have Academy and the school renewal plan, because those are bonding referendums on the same ballot. Island, I think the benefit of having it on that ballot is that you see a holistic picture now of all these school facilities. We're dealing, and you have an inflow coming in. So one offsets the costs of the other. So I think there's a positive piece of having that on the same ballot. So that's the thinking.
Okay, and I understand the logic is rooted in really just a transparency goal, which is that if we're going to put spending questions in front of the voters, we shouldn't piecemeal it out. We should be giving voters a visibility to really all of our capital spending in the foreseeable future. So I understand the logic behind it, and actually I'm a proponent of it. I am just wondering is, as we move through this process, if we see items that don't necessarily have to be together, that we can put to bed sooner rather than later, we should be taking advantage of that. I'm not proposing that we have a referendum every other month or every 60 days, right? So I realize that that's not practical, but I think we should keep open for discussion the questions both together as you've proposed, but also the possibility that they could be separate if a timeline allows us.
I think that the big question, I'm sure the public will say, well, what about November? But we determined that that would require a lot of pieces to be finalized by, I think it was September 2nd was the date that we would have to have everything done to make it all ready to put on the municipal ballot. And that's because, just for the public's benefit, November election is a state ballot, so it has a much longer lead time. So I think that, practically speaking, when we look at all the action items on each of the complexities with each of the different projects, even if you look at Island Avenue, by delaying 3 weeks with the public hearing, that's just going to add more time onto the back end in terms of getting it ready to put on a ballot. So the November piece is just not feasible. So that's why the aggressive timeline would be then, okay, let's do December. That's the next opportunity that we could do. I think that, as we've talked about, there's reasons that the schools would prefer to wait. And then there are some factors that may require more time that we wouldn't be able to make that ballot. But as I said, I think we have to evaluate and see where we are in September, right? Try to get as many things moved forward as quickly as possible. And then we evaluate where we are in all these projects in September.
Right. So we're not taking any action tonight, and we can't because we didn't put it in the agenda way. That's fine. The action items that you identified, specifically around Academy, I think maybe it would be good to put those as an action item on our meeting for Monday, so that we can just simply get that work going, and not have to wait until an August meeting to start that work. So refreshing the numbers, folding in any of the new information,
we can put that on. I don't know if we really need an action item on that, because those are really, I'm trying to find out, we might have budget where we don't need to worry about that. So I'm going to find out if there needs to be any formal action taken on the board, but that's a fair point, and I'll see if there's, if we would need to do that. I mean, we are moving forward on all that already. The only piece is if we want to have Colliers do this usage study, which I know the facilities committee has been discussing this, there would be a cost associated with this. And I don't know if they're going to be ready with any kind of proposal by Monday. So.
Peggy, that last slide you presented was jam-packed with insight and information. And I'd love to make sure that we, the selectmen, can look at it, and the public can as well. If you can make sure that that's prominently displayed somewhere.
Yeah.
I do think we, the selectmen, have a responsibility at this moment, and that is, I think we need to identify all of the remaining information that we think needs to be available for the public to have this issue framed for them, have this issue ready for them to vote. I think it's incumbent upon us to sound off as to whether there is additional analysis information, spreadsheets that need to be available for all three of these projects moving forward. I think that's our job right now. And I would encourage the five of us to put on our thinking caps right now and ask ourselves, what information does the public need? What information will the public need to make a decision on these projects?
I think I think it's important that we do submit to Colliers everything that we feel, ideas, questions, those types of things, so that they can start kind of pulling all that together. And then I guess, Al, are you also recommending that somehow we create like an information resource for the public that they can go to get background materials and
Yeah, I believe our charter holds the selectmen accountable for framing the issue and making sure the public has the information it needs. So
right.
Yes, I think we need to go out of our way as selectmen to think about what information is needed and then make sure it's readily available and accessible to all who want to see it.
Mm.
For all three projects.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And, we can talk about how we can do that also from a practical standpoint with identifying on the website and making it more clear.
Right. Hopefully, Al, the Board of Ed will be able to lean on them for the information on the school project, but us aggregating it together, I think is a great idea.
I think sometimes the public misunderstands that if the selectmen refer something to referendum, that means we support it. The charter says to me that it's not our job to indicate whether we support it or not. It's our job to indicate when something is ready for the voters to make a decision.
Well, you're exactly right, Al, and I would just add to that thought, which is our job is to make sure that it's a truly actionable decision, right? That it's not a pie in the sky. We've done our diligence so that the voters can have faith it's a project that can actually be completed.
Okay, good. And I think obviously at all our meetings, we'll be providing updates on each of these three projects. I think I'll just make sure that happens at all of our meetings over the next 2 months.
Yeah, and just to put a pin in it, Peggy, if we don't need to take action, maybe just a really quick update on the status and expected action items, timelines, things like that. I think really signaling that we're making forward progress here in a meaningful way.
Peggy, this is Scott. Just again, tough to sort of get a word in here, but I just am incredibly appreciative of all the work that you did to pull together the timelines and the details and the thoughts to help the public understand where we are from a process standpoint. I think that was super helpful to me, and hopefully the public feels the same way. But I think continuing to have that dialogue about the timeline and what that looks like and what the public's involvement will be, I'm fully confident that all the information will be on the website. I don't see that as a huge issue for us. But I think clarity in the process is the most important thing.
No, thank you, Scott. And I think all of my slides, just so the public is aware, they're always available on a tab under the Board of Selectmen, and then they're also attached to the minutes. So when you go in to read the minutes, my slides are also incorporated as part of the minutes. So they're always available to the public after meetings. So just so you know, because I know I tend to write a lot on my slides, which is not good practice, but it's just the way my style. So, but at least I know when somebody's picking them up, they're getting full information, rather than just like a one-word bullet point. So they actually understand, the concept that was there. But anyway, so. Any other comments? I guess we have public comment as our final citizens comments next. So any other board comments before we move to citizen comments?
I would like just to say, just because I have been on the member of the Facilities Review Committee, and Scott has as well, that I think that we also need to incorporate into these discussions trying to refine what the work of that committee is, and what type of facilities planning process where we want to undertake for not just these 3 properties, but all of our facilities. And I hope that the programming analysis that Austin will do we'll look at not just Academy, but all of our other buildings as well, to see how we are using our current space. Because I think that's important information for the public to know when we're looking at spending additional money to see, are we using our current space as efficiently and as effectively as we possibly can right now.
I love that point, Erin. I think it gives us a clear picture and a path forward, I think, to all the uses and the needs in town. So I completely agree with you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I guess with that, we can move on to citizens' comments. Lauren, do we have any citizen comments?
No one has their hand raised. Oh, one person. I think this is Joan Walker.
Sorry about that. My child we keep switching back and forth on Zoom. It is Joan Walker, 39 Stepping Stone Lane. I had put in the Q&A, it would be nice if the proposals that are presented for Academy School go to the heirs ahead of time so that they could comment on whether they would go for the right of first refusal on any of them or exclude any of them. I think that's important information for the public to have in making decisions.
Joe, did you mean Island versus Academy?
Island Avenue, I'm sorry. Island Avenue. So that's all. It would be nice to know ahead of time before the public hearing whether or not the heirs are going to kick in their right of first refusal on any of these. I think that would be a good idea. And thank you guys for all the details. Good job.
Thank you. Any other public comment? I know there were some questions, which I'm, if I can do real quickly, I guess. Is that okay during public comment? Just to, okay, will the town need a register to prevent others from flipping property to the school? I think that's some of the discussion that we were having, that the right of first refusal has to go to the heirs first. And so, there would be not a way necessarily for us to prevent that. So that's part of what we are going to be looking into, as we review all 3 proposals prior to the public hearing. We'll be looking at those kinds of options. Will traffic studies be available for all proposals? I don't think there would be traffic study. That's a process that would probably be done through planning and zoning. So I don't think it would be available, at least for, the discussion for the public hearing. Will the town be providing a cash flow analysis to determine the financial impacts? I think what we may try to do is prepare a little bit more detail on expected tax revenue. And that's something that we could just generally estimate based on the limited information that we have on the proposals. And then the comment by Joan that she just made. So those were in the Q&A section for the chat here. So, okay, so I think with that, I guess, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, great. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, everybody.
Aye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Right.